Yeah.
Okay, so so how do you regain trust? Something that is near and dear to your heart, because you're young and because you're a young mother and you're raising children. You want, presumably, you want to trust your government. You want to trust federal law enforcement. And I assume this has something to do with your massive announcement that you teased earlier in the week, where you said, "I am going to do something that will change the face of the American government forever." Here's the exact language of your post that went thermonuclear. "I have an announcement next week that will impact the entire nation. Press conference to be announced soon." Everyone's wondering if it's aliens, but maybe it goes even deeper than that. Congresswoman, can you tell us?
I think it's bigger than that. I think, without getting too much into the details, and the date will be posted soon. You'll find that date for the press conference. I'd actually encourage everyone to tune in, and we're going to be opening it up, if we can, to some independent journalists as well. But I think that for far too long, people have been lied to by their government, and I think the way that you regain trust and you really help restore the nation, and I think bring back not just, I think, hope, but also, and remember, hope is contagious, but you really help it to secure it for future generations. I think that you have to have a fully transparent government. And so I won't get too much more into the details, but we're going to be doing something really big. So I am happy that I was entrusted with this, and I'm going to be doing some good stuff with some incredible people, and I'll leave it at that.
Wow. Okay. So the obvious follow-up question there is, if you're talking about transparency with the American people into their government, Kash Patel on this program months ago saying it's time for a government declassification office. Is it going to be something like that, where we'll be able to actually not have any more state secrets, something like that?
I will wait till the press conference, but what I will say is that, the Senate has a job to do. They would do right by the American people and do right by, I think, themselves if they don't block the confirmations of RFK, Tulsi, and Kash Patel.
Yes.
And we'll just leave it at that.
Okay, all right.
Of course, Stephen Greer is saying that Trump and his administration, they don't know anything about UFOs.
So let's just say that the people I've been meeting with since the election, who are around central to the administration, number one, don't know anything about the subject, which is dangerous.
The people that are directly working with them don't know anything about the subject.
Anyone who's seen unacknowledged knows more than the people around the president.
Of course, right? Good opportunity to sell his movie. If they would only watch Stephen Greer's movie, they would be golden. Of course, that goes against what Ross Coulthart and Haim Eshed were saying, that Trump was fully read in. And Ross Coulthart said that his life was even in danger if he revealed this information. I mean, who knows if that's true or not? Do I trust Ross more than I do Stephen Greer? Yeah, I do. But Stephen Greer does have a surprising amount of access and information and, ability to get stuff done, at least as far as bringing whistleblowers forward and stuff. And as much as I disagree with a lot of stuff that Stephen Greer says and does, as far as pushing disinformation out about abductions, and I made a video about that the other day. See my points there. See if you agree with that or disagree with that. But, he does a lot of good things, like promoting CE5 and really popularizing the idea that everybody can have their own personal relationship with the phenomenon. And, of course, bringing forward great whistleblowers like Michael Herrera. So he's done a lot of good work. Is he on the level here? Is he correct that the Trump administration doesn't know anything about UFOs? I don't know. Well, let me know what you guys think. Of course, everything would be better if they only watched his movie. Why not, right? Why not? Meanwhile, at a recent, congressional panel about the mystery drones, Tim Burchett has these comments.
President Trump informed us the drones were authorized by the Federal Aviation Administration for research and various other reasons. Did it benefit other parts of the government when Biden's Federal Aviation Administration acted in complete secrecy?
I don't believe I can answer that question.
Okay, well, he's not getting an answer there, but at least he's asking questions. Unfortunately, he didn't pushed back very hard on the idea that these were all FAA approved vehicles for research and other purposes. I would love to know what those other purposes are. Are they delivering pizzas? Well, what are these other purposes? Meanwhile, Merrick von Rennenkamp is inferring that the lovely Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick may have stolen some data related to UFOs. He's referring to this article by Chris Mellon in the debrief, closing UAP information gaps to advance national security, some suggestions for Congress in the new administration. And it's a really good article, and I'll link to it, and you can read it at your leisure. Really good stuff. Summary and recommendations. I guess I can read the recommendations that Chris gives. Critical NORAD intercept data that could provide important insights regarding the effectiveness of U.S. air defenses is not reaching Aero or Congress. Therefore, I suggest Congress request a report from NORAD or NORTHCOM on attempted fighter intercepts dating back to 2004 to align with other UAP data already requested and provided to Congress. And of course, 2004 is the Nimitz incident, but of course, they've been intercepting these things for a long time, at least since the 60s, probably earlier. Additionally, Congress should require NORAD to promptly inform Aero of all attempted intercepts going forward. These simple steps will help ensure that the critical UAP and air defense data is not lost. This can be done without costing taxpayers a penny. The impact could be substantial if this requirement opens a new window on violations of U.S. airspace and the ability of U.S. air defenses to engage these unidentified objects. Well, part of his article talks about UAP reporting from the DoD's massive radar and space surveillance systems is missing. The UAP reporting is missing. Well, Merrick von Rennenkamp says, the lovely Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, former director of Aero, was at NORAD Spacecom the day guidance to report such data went out. What gives? And he gives this for proof of what he's saying. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick's flight arrives at that time, meeting with NGA. And I'll link to this, and you can go over it at your leisure, of course. Did Sean Kirkpatrick, serving the UFO control group, steal some UFO-related data? I mean, is that possible? Surely he wouldn't do something that overt, would he? I don't know, guys. I don't know about this one, but that's an interesting story, so let me know what you think. Meanwhile, on a more fun story, Steven Spielberg is retitling his new movie, Disclosure. Still don't know much about this movie. Really looking forward to it. Obviously, Steven Spielberg has been way out ahead of this stuff for a long time. And it's eerie how, similar E.T. looks to the Nazca mummies, and how much truth there is in some of his movies, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that even touched on some of the paranormal stuff and some of the weirder stuff associated with UFOs. So I love Steve. I can't wait for the movie. And I'm very curious why he's titling it Disclosure. Let me know what you guys think. The U.S. military is in possession of a mystery drone. Let's talk about it, guys. Yeah, this is a wild story brought to us by Matt Laszlo at Askapol. He caught up to Representative Chris Smith from the Foreign Affairs Committee, and he asked, have you asked to see one, or they just haven't shot any down, talking about mystery drones. Smith said, as far as we know, 0, talking about shooting them down. One went down, we're told, over Langley. That's right. Congressman said a mystery drone went down over Langley, presumably during the big flap they had about a year or so ago. But it crashed so badly, it's like, come on, we don't have the capability to nab one of these things. I think we do. So it's unclear from this comment if he's saying he believes we actually shot this down or not. if it crashed on its own. Of course, UFOs seem to crash all the time, but we also shoot them down, and we've been doing that for a long time. We still don't know for sure if these objects are anomalous or not. They certainly seem to be, especially when you hear about the orbs transforming into mystery drones. And I've heard a lot of those encounters, and some of you guys in the audience have told me that you have seen that same thing with your own eyes. So I can't discount that at all. I think that's a very likely possibility that we're looking at something very anomalous, at least with some of the mystery drones, but there could be some other stuff mixed up with that. There could be conventional drones of some sort. Either way, Representative Smith, his full quote, one went down, we're told, over Langley. Near Langley, but it crashed so badly it's like, come on, we don't have the capability to nab one of these things? I think we do. Seems to be suggesting that the military, whether they brought it down or not, is now in possession of a mystery drone that crashed near Langley. That's huge. He also says another UFO mystery drone, or a mystery drone, set down over, what was it, Earl? Yeah, a Naval Weapons Station Earl. He says, that was a huge disappointment, with all due respect to the previous administration, because the guidance to them was, if it's over your perimeter, you can do something. And then we had it over their perimeter. At Naval Weapons Station Earl, we had 2. Matt Laszlo says, yeah. Answer, right over the perimeter. 1 landed. They rushed over and it had already taken off again. It's like, are you kidding me? It's a munitions depot. So expressing shock that, these objects can come and go from a munitions depot. But 1 landed, he says. 1 landed and then took off again. So they're landing and they're crashing at military facilities. And they're all FAA approved vehicles for unknown purposes, research and other purposes. And meanwhile, we have this gentleman here who is Sweetwater County and from Wyoming, Sheriff's Lieutenant Fisher, who was talking about how officers were pursued for 30 miles by mystery drones. The audio is not great, but it's an interesting story, and it's only like 30 seconds long, so stick with me.
One of the initial sightings, we had several deputies go out, attempt to photograph, identify anything of the aircraft, operators of the aircraft. They were unsuccessful. On their way back into Rock Springs from the power plant, 1 or 2 of the drones actually followed our deputies back in all the way to our Justice Center, which is located with our detention facility. And then they departed the area. The drones did after following our deputies back. So,
Yeah, they followed them for 30 miles. The mystery drones, these FAA approved mystery drones pursuing police officers for 30 miles. I buy it, guys. And crashing or being shot down at Langley. I still would like some clarification whether that was a shoot down or a crash. Either way, the military is doubtlessly in possession of that vehicle. So yeah, we've got drones, y'all. We've got drone carcasses or drone wreckage. What have they found out from that drone wreckage? Whatever they found out from that drone wreckage, they have not told us. Have they told the president? Obviously, members of Congress are aware of this and talking about this. Now, the president probably isn't briefed on every single thing that every congressperson is aware of, but that's kind of a big deal, right? You would hope that at least he had been briefed on that, and that he would, maybe have found out the results of them investigating that mystery drone. What the hell was that thing? What are these things, guys? Either way, the phenomenon still seems to be going on. Potentially, helicopters are chasing them. Potentially, they're being studied right now at Langley or Wright-Patterson or wherever that object is. They're chasing police officers. This is such a strange phenomenon, still ongoing. We have no answers, only lies from the government. I'm being patient, and I'm hoping for positive things. There's definitely positive things to look forward to. Potentially Anna Paulina Luna's announcement. I'll be talking more about Tim Gallaudet's involvement and what he might be pushing forward. So there's definitely exciting things to look forward to, and there's signs. So yeah, that's really cool. Another Nazca related news, kind of news. Jaime Maussan has talked about the finned being, the being with a crest on its head. Could that be something similar to the Virginia alien case in James Fox's documentary Moment of Contact? A great case, very well corroborated. Well, there were these two beings that had these crests on their head, and they had red eyes. Both of them sadly died, ultimately. There was an artifact that was discovered among the Nazca mummies, and this is it. And it looks an awful lot like the Virginia being, with the crest on its head, the three crests on its head, the big eyes, etc. So is this a depiction of the being, that belongs to the specimen? The Jaime Maussan has talked about them being in possession of a specimen that has fins on it. And we know from the treasure trove of artifacts found with the Nazca mummies that there is an artifact depicting a being with a crest. So is that it? Is a Virginia being, if we're going to call it that, a Virginia alien, in possession, or does Jaime Maussan and his people, are they in possession of a Virginia being? And when are they going to reveal that, guys? Because they've talked about that before. But are they actually going to unveil it in the near future? Are they just waiting for some scientists to do enough research on it so that when they do unveil it to the public, that they can show the science behind it? Are they deliberately drip feeding this stuff to us to keep us engaged and interested in the topic? Because, hey, it's working. But I want to see that being, guys. I want to see the Nazca mummy that looks like a Virginia alien. And if it is a Virginia alien, what does that imply? What is the connection between the Virginia case, which wasn't all that far away geographically from Nazca? What's the connection, guys? Thousands of years apart, but possibly connected. And also, we might have a body. We've got bodies, y'all. Meanwhile, Diana Pasulka talks about the spiritual connection with UFOs.
Something for the ride home.
Oh, thank you for giving me two, because I have a lot of kids, so.
You're a writer, professor of religious studies at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. You have authored a series of books, including American Cosmic UFOs, Religion and Technology, Heaven Can Wait, Purgatory in Catholic Devotional Culture and Encounters, Experiences with Non-Human Intelligences. You've been a guest on several prominent podcasts, such as the Joe Rogan Experience and the Lex Friedman podcast, and you've served as consulting producer on the Emmy Award-winning Netflix series Encounters. You are also the religion consultant on The Conjuring and was featured in the J.J. Abrams docuseries UFO. You spent your career teaching and writing about American religious history and Catholic history, including studying at the Vatican Archive. Sounds fascinating. Your research connects religion, technology, and now the enigmatic realm of the UFO phenomena. Now you find yourself working with scientists and military personnel on the topic, something you never thought you'd be doing when you began your career. And you're a Christian believer and a mother, probably the most important things, right?
Yes, yes.
Like, how did the interest in the UFO stuff even happen?
Yeah, so I'm the last person, by the way, who would be talking about UFOs if you talked to me, 14 years ago. Nobody would say that I would be talking about UFOs. Anybody you talk to who knows me Diana's talking about UFOs. So this happened because of the Purgatory book. So I had created that log of aerial phenomena, historical aerial phenomena. And I thought it was weird. And so I showed my friend, and we went to this conference where I met people who had these experiences, and they were telling me things that looked like a pattern match to what I was studying. So I thought, I'll go ahead and look at this a little bit further, but I didn't tell anybody. I was just kind of like doing an analysis. And then I thought, this is interesting. It's basically a modern day ascent narrative, the ascent of the soul, right? So if you see images of like people being abducted or cows being abducted, you'll see the cow rising into, ascending into the spaceships, the people, the farmer being ascended. We see the same thing with images of purgatory. You see like back, maybe not cows, of course, but, European Catholics will be ascending into their souls ascending, but it shows them ascending. So I thought this is like a modern day ascent narrative. I could use my methods for studying this, no problem. It won't discredit me to study this, right? So I started to do this study, and it was really interesting. And then what happened was I started to get emails and phone calls from aerospace engineers, people from known aerospace corporations and institutions. And they wanted to talk to me about my research that I was doing. I was like, what? Wait, I think you got the wrong person. No. So, and this kept happening. And I decided, okay, they wanted to meet with me. A couple of them wanted to meet with me. So I thought, okay, I'll meet with them, because why do they want to know about this angel event that happened in the 1800s?
How did they get wind of you? Were you writing
I started to do conferences with the people that I know who are other professors of religion. And for us, it was like, modern day ascent narrative, easy to understand. But they would then somehow were scouring like the internet of any academic who was doing, the word UFO or anything like that. And that's how they found me. And once I was found, a lot of them reached out to me. And at first I was a little bit put off, because I thought, this is kind of odd. It kind of freaked me out, to tell you the truth. But I did start to talk to them. And one of them, I actually put him off for like a year and a half. I mean, I know it sounds weird, but I had 5 young kids and I was busy, right? So didn't make this connection. I thought it was weird. But when I started to talk to them, I recognized that they weren't looking at it like I was looking at it. They were looking at it like it actually happened. Whereas I was looking at it more like a metaphor. Like, this is their interpretation of something they saw in the sky. They wanted to know what they saw in the sky. They also wanted to know what kinds of things happened to these people. Like, were they injured? And a lot of times they were. And so that started to get me to like re-look at what I was doing. And I started to look at it from their perspective. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think that these things are probably real. And that was shocking. So I was shocked for a whole year. What I did was, thankfully I had a friend, Jeff Kripal at Rice University, and I shared all my stuff with him. And he was shocked too, by the way.
What was it? What was the turning point for you that made you think that this isn't metaphorical anymore?
Okay, so the turning point was when I met a person who I have to call Tyler, because he's anonymous. One of these people that, when I look back now, I recognize worked for one of these SAPs, most likely. I can't prove it, but it looks like it. So he worked for...
Can you describe SAP for the audience,
So this
please?
It's called a special access program in the military, and he worked for an unacknowledged SAP. And he described his work as a hobby. This was in 2013. He described his work as a hobby. He had lots of clearances from different agencies, Department of Defense and like NASA, like a lot. And he worked as a mission controller, and he also worked as this, he was like a space shuttle. He worked in the space shuttle program for its duration until it ended. He was always at a launch of the space shuttle. He also did scientific stuff. So he was this character that I didn't quite understand when I first met him. And he really wanted to know the data. So he wanted to know, he really was interested in any work that I would do at the Vatican. And he was also interested in any work that I did that had to do with consciousness, because he said that in his field, he said, consciousness is the next step. That's where we are studying, and that's why we're interested in your work. And so, again, I was really slow to work with him because I was concerned. You know, I was like concerned about what it would mean for my life. It might change my life, you know, and it did. It did change my life. So that's what changed, is that I started to look at the Catholic tradition again from a new lens. So I had looked at like Teresa of Avila is this nun who lived in the 1500s, and she had an experience with one of these seraphs, like, or an angel, right? But she didn't call it an angel at first. So I went back and I looked at these experiences that these people had, that we now, when we look at them, we see the nice prayer cards, and it looks really like a sweet kind of encounter that they had. But really, the encounter, when you read the primary source material that you see in the archives, it looks really different than how it's represented. And that was shocking to me because—
Which archives?
Okay, so there are two main archives that hold— there's lots of different archives, but the ones that hold lots of information about this, first is the Vatican Archive, and the Vatican, it used to be called the Vatican Secret Archive, but it's called the Apostolic Archive, and it's the Pope's archive. And you can't just go to that. You have to actually have certain credentials to get into it. And so I have those credentials. So I was able to go there, and I was able to look at the primary source material for some of the saints in the Catholic and Christian tradition that looked like had angel events or levitated and had anomalous activity. And I was able to look at that and assess the primary source data on my own, which is really fascinating. Yeah. So I did that work. And
can you name one of the saints, or maybe a couple?
All of the saints. So once you start to look at the saints, you see that what is said about what was said in there are what are called primary source material. This would be some of the first material that comes out about that experience that saint had. Teresa of Avila wrote her own experience. That's what makes it so important, is that she wrote about it. It was later what's called redacted. It was changed by the church. She said she saw this angel and it wasn't a vision, it was in reality. And she said that it was short and it was shiny, and she was confused because it didn't look like an angel. And she goes, well, it must be a cherub, right? So she had confusion about it. And it had a dart. And she said this dart it took and it basically put it in me, right? So this looks like modern day UFO abduction reports. And so once you start to see those connections, you cannot unsee them. And you're like, okay, got it. This is different than how it's represented in the prayer card, right? Where it's beautiful. And I hope that I'm not offending the Catholics that are looking at this, and because it's their childhood. They were brought up with these images.
How do you know it was redacted?
Oh, because we have the redactions.
So do you have the original transcripts as well?
Yeah, I have those.
Why would they redact it?
It didn't conform to their theology.
So
it happens all the time.
So
it even happens today.
I mean, I know it happens in government all the time.
Oh, yeah. It's standard. Yeah.
Are you saying that the Catholic Church just took a first-hand account and said, "Nah, this doesn't align with what we think, so we're just going to change it"?
Yes.
And then left the original transcripts in?
Yeah, well, yes. Because people didn't read as much as they read now. And they weren't betting on us, going back and looking at it. And it doesn't matter to them now. They're okay with it. Literally, they're okay with it. They're like, yeah, we did that.
Okay.
Because they didn't do it today. They weren't the ones that did it. But the Catholics, after Teresa had her experience and told the priests that were her quote unquote confessors, those were like kind of like a therapist, they were priests.
I mean, it's just interesting because then it's. I mean, what else did the Catholics just change?
I think it happens in every religion, to tell you the truth.
I'm sure it does.
So,
You know,
we
it's
can
just-
get angry at the Catholics, but in every religion, a person has an event that's a legitimate event that is profound for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they tell that event and it changes people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And then that religion is like, that didn't happen, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
They redact it. It's happening now with the UFO topic.
Yeah, I mean, it happens in all subjects. It's just,
Especially at that time. Like today, because people talk about crash retrieval sites and stuff, you go, oh, a crash retrievals place. You may not believe in it, but at least you know what it is. I didn't even know what he was talking about. I hadn't read the Day After Roswell by Colonel Corso, right? I didn't know any of that. I did afterwards, of course. I had to do that in order to understand what was going on. But that's how it was briefed to me.
so I read that you went to the Vatican with was it a NASA
It was Tyler.
scientist?
It was Tyler.
Okay. What
So
did
he
you,
had affiliations with that too, with NASA also.
what happened?
Okay, so this was a really interesting trip.
What prompted the trip? Let me start there. What prompted
Okay, so the trip had nothing to do with UFOs in the beginning. It was purely about my scholarship, right? So I do Catholic history and I know people at the Vatican. I was invited to go by Brother Guy Consolmagno. He is the director of the Vatican Observatory, which is the observatory of the Vatican. It's been around since the 1800s. And he's a Jesuit. He went to the school I went to. And he's a monk. And so we were talking, and I was interested in UFO stuff. So I asked him about the Vatican, if they had anything that had to do with space. And he said, yes. We have a whole observatory archive. Everything that has to do with space at the Vatican comes to our archive. And so I was like, I'd like to look at that. And he said, you're welcome to come and stay. We have a scholar's residence. You can stay as long as you want. So I said, okay, I'll do that. So I knew that I could go and stay there, but I hadn't yet decided to go to the archive of the Vatican. But the opportunity arose for me to do that, and it was to examine the levitation records of what we call the canonization records. Canonization is a process where people become saints, and so there are big records. You just don't say this person's a saint. You have to prove it. So they have these records at the Vatican. And this was for Joseph of Cupertino, who's a saint who's said to have levitated. And I was supposed to go and look at those records. By the way, I have those records in a strange series of events. So those records are now in my possession. Signed an agreement with the Vatican about it, and I didn't intend for that to happen, nor did I even want those records, but I do have them. And I keep them in a safe place. So, and they're translated too. So I have these records. They were in like 17th century Latin and Italian. So that's something I can't translate. So I had to find a team of translators. So in any case, I'm supposed to go to the Vatican. And so Tyler says, I'd like to go and look at those records too. And I thought, that actually might be really an interesting thing. I'll see what he thinks about these levitation records and also the space observatory stuff, because he's a space guy. He's been in the space program his whole life. So it would be really interesting for me to see his reactions to this data. So I thought it would be good for him to go. But this really had nothing to do with, in my opinion, the UFO thing. But it actually did, but I didn't know it. So we ended up going, and let me describe how he got in, because he shouldn't, by rights, get into the secret archive because he doesn't have those credentials. So we thought about that. Now, it takes a while. You can't just go there and say, I want to see these books or these old manuscripts. You actually, because there's like 53 miles of shelving at the Vatican. So they need to know what you need to, they need time in order to find it for you. So like a year in advance, I was in touch with the Vatican and said, I need to find these, do you have these and these, all the records. And so they said, yes, okay. So we had to fly there. He was on a different plane than me. And he got to the Vatican before I did. And we had anticipated that he wouldn't be able to get into the Vatican archive. So we did the best we could. We got like a friend of his who was a department chair and said, you know, he vouched for his character. He's doing research in this area and stuff. But he couldn't get in. So I was on the plane and he was texting me and he was like, I can't get in. They're not letting me in. He said, I think I should show my ID. Now, I didn't really want anybody at the Vatican to know that I was there with someone who's a space researcher, because I didn't want them to know that we were looking for anything that had to do with UFOs, because in the one sense I wasn't, but in the other sense, I just wanted the best impression when I got there. So I didn't want him to do that. And I honestly didn't think it would work. Okay, so I didn't think he'd be able to get in. But after like an hour or two, I'm on the plane, I feel bad for him, and he finally says, can you please just, I'm gonna do this, all right? And I said, okay, just go ahead. So one of his IDs, I don't know which one, he shows to the guy who's the security at the secret archive. And he said he dropped his wallet and he went down to pick it up. And when he looked up, he saw his face on the screen of the guy's computer, and he was in. And as soon as he got in, he met a priest who was an American, and we got access. So that's when when he changed my idea of Catholic history, he also changed my idea of the Vatican. So when we got to the Vatican, I couldn't believe it. I was like, what, how come this guy has way more access than me? How did he get that access? So it was a mystery to me. But he also pointed out a couple things too. So there's some really, really scary guards in the Vatican itself that don't look like the Swiss guards. Like, they look like militia guys. They have these, like, I'm not well versed in guns, but they look like they have like machine guns, right? And you can't go anywhere. Like, I was holding on to Father Kelty, who was showing us around, in the Vatican and helping us out. Like, if I was away from him, I was fearful of my life, because these guys were mean. They're like, why are you here? Kind of thing. So, Vatican has some incredible security.
I don't know where you're at. We're talking about Ezekiel, angels. First, I thought maybe we're going with I mean you. UFOs are spiritual entities. Then you're at a crash site and you pick up a chunk of metal, and we're at the Vatican. So what are you thinking? What is this? What is all of this?
Yeah.
Is it two separate things? Is there a spiritual entity and a nuts and bolts thing, or where are you
I think
at?
so. Yeah, I think so. I don't know.
You have to think about this all the time.
Well, of course, this is what I'm doing right now. So yes, I do. But that doesn't mean that I have an answer. So I do know this. I do know that when people who are part of these programs, or not anymore, of course, because the programs are under scrutiny, when aerospace people reach out to me, they're looking at this. They don't know either. They don't know. They want to know. So it's an area of exploration. And to me, there's something that I think some of them are missing. And it's something that Tyler did not miss. It's that there's a spiritual component to this. And if you don't get with the spiritual component, you're not going to have access to the information. That's what I believe, only because that's how I've seen it in the last 12 years. So since I've been doing this, there are a lot of people, governments, people who represent government, our government, who are scrambling to figure this technology out, safeguard this technology, or, do something with technology for either weapons or to better humanity, all of these things. But the people who I've met who seem to have the most access to this, they don't have those intentions. Those intentions are not their intentions. So to me, there seems to be, just like when you said you did psychedelics, your intention allowed you to have a positive experience. That's my interpretation. Because why do I think that? I'm not randomly just thinking that. I'm thinking that because I'm going back to the history of these protocols that allow people to access these realms. And when you are reverent and respectful, it seems there's a better outcome. Well, maybe that's the case here. I don't know, but that's so far my conclusion. So what I do know, though, is that it appears that there's a...
So let me, help me understand. So you're saying that your intentions for research might trigger a specific outcome? Or
let's
answer.
see, that sounds very quantum, but I think that your character might determine access to information or knowledge. So Tyler had a certain character, and I don't see that in the people who are scrambling to be the first UFO genius scientist.
Okay.
Completely different characters right there.
So how do you differentiate I asked you if you believe there's a spiritual component and a kind of nuts and bolts type component. How do you differentiate the two? I mean, do they have any relation to each other?
I don't know. So this is something that I think people are trying to figure out. Let's put it this way. Okay, if you think about something that we think to be subjective in our minds, completely, like you could even call it spiritual in the sense that it's spirit, it's not matter. That would be our thoughts, right? We tend to think of thoughts as completely non-physical, non-material. Would you not agree?
I don't believe that anymore.
I know you don't believe it anymore. Okay. Why don't you believe that anymore? And I agree with you.
Why don't I? Through some of my own experiences and interviews, and it's impossible for me to articulate this, but I'll try. I think that you can believe or manifest or whatever you want to call it, realities into existence. I honestly believe, I think I've done it. I think other people that I know have done this. I think that we know very little about consciousness, and I think that we may have the abilities to create our own realities, but we don't have the knowledge on how to do that. I think we get little snippets on how that could be done, but as far as like a full scope, I don't think anybody has a. Does that make any sense at all?
Of course, no, it makes perfect sense.
But
but you did go through a period of not believing that thoughts could be things, right? That could be measurable.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would suggest this. So and this has something to do with the question you asked me about the parts being spiritual or material. We're at a point in time, and this is part of what is fascinating to me. So I've been documenting it. So I wrote some articles. By the way, my articles are free on Academia EDU. And I wrote an article where this was about 2017, 2016, where I was documenting the human brain, the computer brain interface that's happening, that's really taking off right now. And then there were two studies. One was at, I think it was the University of Washington, where people had, and this is now common, where they were using brain imaging, but they were able to identify what a person was thinking about. So a person was thinking about a dog, and the image of a dog would become something that could be seen on a computer screen. So they had technology that was able to read brain waves. So therefore, thoughts, which we used to think were completely subjective things that were internal and private, were no longer that. And we were seeing the beginning of that process. And I think that the beginning of this process is going to be exponential at this point because of what Elon Musk is doing and other scientists.
With Neuralink?
Yeah, with all of these types of things that are happening. I also think that the government has been in on this in terms of its remote viewing programs, utilizing consciousness, in order to obtain information. So I would suggest that UAP is like this, is very similar. So in terms of the combination, we're going to be able to identify, when people report UAP events, a lot of what happens is that they report experiences of what you call downloads, like experiences of information that they're getting from whatever it is that are UAP. And that's been consistent in the historical record. Like Joan of Arc, right? This light appears to her, and then it says, do this, do this. And at first she resists because she's like, what are you? And then she goes, oh, you're St. Michael. I can trust you. And then she gets the downloads of military information that she actually utilizes. Like, she's a kid, by the way, when this happened. I think she's 15.
Wow.
Yeah. So how are Catholics in that day and age? She decides to dress like a boy. How does a young girl in that day and age convince older men, that this is a good thing, and they're convinced? So what I'm saying is that it's something like that. Who has talked about this before? And so for me, going to books is like what I do. So I looked back and I saw that, again, Plato's Republic, it talks about the cave. The allegory of the cave is like where, you're in this cave and people are creating a fictional world. It's basically the Matrix. So if you haven't read Plato's Republic, the Matrix is about it. And then you've got Brave New World was Plato's, an update of Plato's Republic. And then 1984 was also an update of the allegory of the cave. So this is the idea that there's something that's being hidden from us, and there are characters who are hiding it from us. And like in 1984, they're terrible, right? They're going to try. There's a never-ending war, right, in 1984. And so people have been through this depression, Sean, and have talked about it. And it made me more depressed because I was like, damn, it looks structural. It looks like this is just the structure of the world. Who else has said this? Well, Jesus did. Jesus said this. Jesus said, you must live in the world, but not be of it. Jesus also spoke in parables, which was code. He was speaking to his own audience, okay? He was speaking to the audience who had ears to hear. Okay, so that's when I was like, now I finally understand. It takes me a while to really get something. So I had to go through those experiences in order to truly understand that not everybody's going to get it. And yeah, they're going to look like you call it demonic. I might call it they're in the Matrix. There's different words to describe it, but they're not awakened to something that you and I feel like they should be awakened to. And in fact, they're hurting themselves, okay? See? So it's like something that's maybe the way it is.
When you talk about, some of this being structural, and it sounds like over generations and generations.
It seems like it. I mean, if Socrates is talking about it, and then, through Plato, and then Jesus is talking about it, and then it gets redone in every generation, Brave New World, 1984, The Matrix in the 1990s. It's the same kind of recognition. Has anything become, what does this mean? I think it has a message for us. And so you and me, we're American. We want to save the world. We have it inbred that we can make it better. This can be better, right? But this kind of thing suggests that it's a structural, just posing it.